regarding budget discussions for 10 a.m. Ask for a motion from Councillor Jones, the Committee of the Whole adopt the agenda for the Special Committee of the Whole Budget Discussions meeting January 8th as presented.
I'll give you that motion, Mayor Snodgrass.
Thank you. All in favor? Carried. All yours, David. Or whoever started.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, Council. Chris, any opening comments, or shall I proceed? Go ahead. All right, very good. Thank you. The desired outcome for today's session is to receive direction on a tax rate increase and potential use of tax stabilization reserves to support a 2024 balanced budget. You have before you various iterative summaries for both capital and operating positions. The objective for administration is to complete these schedules following today's session as we make final preparations on the request for a decision to approve the 2024 budget in our upcoming session on January 22nd. Budget 2024 marks the second year of budget development for this finance team under current leadership. Over these 2 years, our focus has been on three core elements. Element number one, good governance and reasonable assurance, whereby sufficient evidence is provided that shows that administration has a systematic process in place to realize the town's strategic priorities. This includes evidence such as high-quality conversations with all levels of the organization, documenting and modeling the outcomes of these conversations, maintaining a clear line of sight on all legislation, including the MGA, accounting standards, occupational health and safety and emergency preparedness, and environmental protection. Finally, making available to all stakeholders all information as is permissible, hence the virtual binders that you have seen a few different versions of. The second element, so element one was good governance. Element number two, protecting the town as a going concern with a focus on long-term sustainability. And then element three, taxpayer focus to protect service levels while minimizing tax increases. So going back over these past 2 years, some key themes we have noted to support reasonable insurance. These include, for MGA compliance purposes, Budget 2024 is a balanced budget as defined under the MGA and is a result of extensive collaboration between all leadership teams to share information, purpose, and plans to support the realization of key strategic initiatives. For process purposes and in support of a balanced budget, beginning June 2023, conversations were completed with leaders to confirm future departmental plans remain consistent with previous assumptions. Overall, the change to key programs and various cost pools can be funded through noted changes in revenues and reserves, as you see on the various summaries, resulting in a balanced budget from 2023, continuing through budget 2024. So what kicked off the process last June was a project charter that we developed that detailed cost, scope, and time when you think about project management philosophy, to develop both a 3-year operating and a 5-year capital plan. This was submitted to the leadership team and approved in June. This project management philosophy, cost, scope, and time, we're using more and more or aligning more and more operating and capital projects to be supported by this philosophy. So a good example is our HRIS, Ceridian, that we're currently implementing. And in a few months, we'll start with the finance ERP. Come April, May, we will kick that off. Following the project charter, we then developed and distributed to all leadership team members a detailed project management plan. And again, the philosophy here was to state the purpose, the desired outcome of the budget management process within a very structured perspective. Again, all part of that reasonable assurance perspective. Other key themes that we have introduced to council starting last year and continuing through this year, we talked about financial stability and how the town is financially stable over the short term, given an anticipated balanced budget for fiscal 2023 that will protect all elements of accumulated surplus. As of Friday, again, looking at our two-way balance, maybe a very small surplus, but nothing more than that, was financial sustainability in 2022 and reaching about $7 million or 18% of total expenses at the end of fiscal 2022. And this is where we introduced the idea that a benchmark be set for budget purposes, that the percentage of unrestricted surplus to total expenses not exceed 20%, and how setting this benchmark will impact future budget assumptions from a short-term stability perspective. Okay? So again, playing to reasonable assurance, we introduced and discussed short-term financial stability and long-term financial sustainability. Beginning with our meeting on November 20th and continuing into our meeting on December 4th, we went through substantial amount of detail around capital and operating projects. Okay? From a capital perspective, we talked about asset management, we defined asset management, and we noted that asset management practices directly support sustainable service delivery. From an MGA and legislative compliance purpose, under Section 246 of the MGA, a capital budget must include estimated amounts for the amount needed to acquire, construct, remove, or improve capital property, and the anticipated source and amounts of money to pay the costs referred to in the previous clause. Again, consistent with the MGA capital plans, we must prepare a written plan respecting anticipated capital property additions over a period of at least the next 5 years, understanding that council may elect to go longer than the noted 5 years. In our meeting of November 20th, we noted that equity and tangible capital assets averaged $250 million between 2020 and 2022, and new investment into TCA is largely equivalent to amortization of TCA, somewhere between $8 to $9 million, a minimal benchmark to protect core town infrastructure. That was followed, our meeting on December 4th, by an email that was distributed to council by Riley, just giving some additional details on fleet. As in our meeting of December 4th, there were questions about certain elements of the fleet. That was distributed December 11th, I believe. And ultimately, within the virtual package, you will find how we've brought all of this together. So, 5-year capital plan. You will note that we have removed various elements that council wanted removed following our briefing on December 4th. You will also note within that package the forecast going out 5 years as required under the MGA. And then for each of those elements where we knew, we noted what is the revenue source? How is this going to be funded? Okay? So that is capital and operating projects. You will note the total new additions is about $17.125 million, of which $285,000, and we'll come back to this later in the conversation, $285,000 is not funded by any existing specific purpose reserves or any grants, and council will need to decide whether or not to fund those through taxation or through use of the tax stabilization fund. So that's capital plans. Again, lots of detail, lots of data to support good governance. Starting last February, or February 2023, again under MGA 283.1, we must prepare written plan respecting anticipated financial operations over a period of at least the next 3 fiscal years. Okay? And that's the details that you have in the virtual binder. So The most recent iteration, it was upwards of 200 pages, substantial amount of detail by cost center, by type of expense, type of revenue. Again, all speaking towards reasonable assurance that administration has looked at every element of the financial position, and we are fully aware of all of the triggers that we can pull to make sure that the town continues over the long term. Strategic initiatives that supported Budget 23 remain current and relevant. Driving a Budget 24 request that uses Budget 23 as a baseline and injects adjustments for material financial change as a result of programming updates and reinvestment of potential operating savings to protect existing services while investing into new programming. Just to bring forward a comment that we made this time last year around reporting and decision-making and the high degree of confidence that we have within our operating expenses. We noted that 90% of operating expenses and 100% of investment into tangible capital assets is controlled by 6 staff, including 3 SLT. And that while we report in detail by cost center and purpose for accounting standards, MGA, and audit purposes, decision-making is highly centralized, resulting in a high degree of cost control, cost certainty, and asset investment. And so when you go through the virtual binder, I'm not going to go through this in detail, you will find various summaries by cost center, by type of expense. You'll also note that when you get into the details by cost center, that we've gone out 3 years. And again, this is general assumptions. I believe we used 2%, Michelle, if I'm correct. Going out 3 years to be consistent and in compliance with the requirements of the MGA. Okay. Of course, included within the operating statements, there is compensation. November 20th, Sonia came forward to council and walked council through a change in compensation strategy. We noted that staff compensation and benefits are the single largest expense, about 45% of our total expenses, and how important retaining and attracting talent. It is a challenge, and compensation is one of the tools to help. And competition for municipal employees is high, and municipality or mobility in the region has impacted the town. This time last year, I introduced that fiscal 23 budget development and salaries, wages, and benefits was moved to human resources and Sonia from financial services, with both departments now working together as true partners to the development of the significant budget line. That was started last year, continued into this year, and I just wanted to thank Sonia for an amazing partnership and pulling this together with us. So thank you, Sonia. In Sonia's presentation, and again, I'm not going to go through this in detail, but Sonia outlined 3 options, and it was option 1 that appeared to be comfortable for council. That is the entire change, all in 2024. So the cost to make a correction was about $360,000. The total cost, all in, $855,000. So that meant organic, ongoing, about $495,000. And you'll see that within our financials when I draw your attention to that. Again, going back to our meeting of December 4th, we spent some time just walking through municipal tax framework, where we talked about when we identify a net municipal tax dollar change, how we need to add back requisitions to give us a gross taxation, and it's the gross taxation for which the residents will be impacted. And we drew up various examples of that. Ultimately, assuming assessment value increase for this next year is 6.2%. If our gross taxation that you arrive at today is below the 6.2, then we'll see a decline in mill rates or tax rates. If you wish to go above the assessed value increase of 6.2, then we'll see an increase in mill rates. Okay, so decrease, increase, depending on where you wish to go, your decision on tax change. I do want to note that over the past 3 to 4 years, we have been successful at reducing residential mill rates year over year. And this simply recognizes the fact that the tax rates that you approve have been less than the assessed value increase. Okay? And finally, we had various discussions around use of the tax stabilization fund. It's a position that we took in 2023, and its relevance continues into 2024. We noted the use of restricted reserves is appropriate when current year expenditures include cumulative adjustments from previous years. And you think back to the compensation framework. So as a portion of the recommended increase to salaries, wages, and benefits includes programming adjustments to reset the cumulative compensation framework, it is appropriate to fund a portion of these increases through reserves in lieu of passing the total cost to residents through an increase in tax levies. It's a position that we took for budget 2023, and it remains relevant for budget 2024. So to bring it all together, significant information has been provided to council to support reasonable assurance that we have our fingers on the pulse of the town. And now we need to make a final decision on tax and the corresponding impact on tax stabilization reserves. If I could ask, draw your attention to what is now on your screen. They were. Yeah, we're good. So, just to give you a direction on what you are looking at, the left-hand side, this is when we roll everything up, we have gone back to budget holders, we've reduced expenses, and ultimately the need comes down to a few elements. Number one, salary, wages, and benefits. There's a correction impact of 360. And then there's what I call organic change. So we're changing compensation framework that will have an ongoing impact. In addition, special projects not funded by grants or special purpose reserves. There's an amount for that. So the total need is about 1.14 million. A potential solution, again, this is up to council, if we increase tax revenues by 3.3% for the organic change in salaries, so that is the ongoing aspect, and we use tax stabilization reserves to fund the one-time investments. So that includes the salary, wages, and benefits correction at 360, special projects at 285. That is a potential solution for council to consider. On the right-hand side of that schedule, it's a busy schedule. We introduced this on a meeting on December 4th. 1, 2, 3, 4%, the different scenarios. We did a scenario for a full scoop whereby we increased taxation to the full value of the assessed value of property. The right column over is if we simply use taxation to support all aspects of the compensation change, which is 855. And then the final solution at the far right, just to give you a sense, is if you did not want to impact the tax stabilization reserve and you wanted to fund the entire 1.14 million through tax increase, we would be looking at gross taxation of about 7.6, assumed average assessment value increase about 10.7%. The residential impact, 2023 monthly, is about $23.70. It's at that level, just based on these preliminary estimates, that we would be able to fund the entire need. You will note I've added a column 3.3%, and this is just to give you a sense of at what rate would we still be able to reduce the mill rate that we have seen over the past 3 to 4 years, and reasonable use of reserves to pay for the special projects and the compensation correction. Ultimately, the decision rests with council, and that concludes my comments.
Thanks, David. Any questions from council? Councillor Kinghorn?
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. I'll start it off. I have a lot of questions, but I'll start off with two. This budget is based on zero change to the franchise fees? Like Fortis and
Franchise fees?
The rates weren't changed.
no change? No change to franchise fees? And then we are gonna get our user rates from REC coming up. We're gonna do a rate review, I understand, within the next couple of months. Is there expected increase in that?
At this point, nothing material, but you
Nothing
are
material.
correct, we are looking at rates.
Okay,
Yes.
but we're not expecting any big rates for user fees?
Nothing material, no.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I think you guys have done a fantastic job, David, in getting us where we need to be. And I don't like to compare to other municipalities, but 3.3 sounds pretty good compared to what others are forced with, right?
Yes.
Calgary's over 7, Okotoks is over 4, over 4.5. You know, the compensation for our staff, like we are seeing a challenge with keeping good staff here that can get poached from the city of Calgary real quick. And I think with our staff being by far our most important asset in as far as this organization is considered, and how we service this town, staying competitive and getting back in line with where we need to be to keep our staff and attract good staff is extremely important. So it's not cheap, not for any business, not for mine, not for the town of High River. It's a big piece of it, but without it, you're toast. So I'm in full support of the 3.3. I think it's fair, and it keeps our service levels where we want them to be. It takes care of the capital projects where we need them. The council has discussed and approved, and where we want to go for 2024. So I don't see anything missing. I think it's very fair. Councillor Kingwart?
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. I tend to agree with you. But the monthly, I always like to talk this number, is what is the impact to the average homeowner per month with this increase? And if I read this right, we're talking about $9.80 a month. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Barton?
Thank you, Mayor. David, what Jamie Kinghorn was talking about, the $9.80, what is that based on? What's the average house value that you're using in that particular case?
We've assumed on a 6.2% increase year over year, that is approximately $445,000 average home value residential.
Okay, and that's High River's.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
I know we've gone through this 1,000 times, but I'll ask for comments from councillors on on your feelings as to where you're at with which, is the 3.3 where you're leaning? Does anybody have any other suggestions, or do you want to do otherwise other than the 3.3? Councillor Smith?
Thank you,
Go
Mayor.
around the horn.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. I think I'm comfortable with the 3.3% increase. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, that once the compensation is addressed, then that will negate any further other than regular annual increases. So for this, it's sort of the one-off, and then from this point forward, it will be more or less stable. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the new compensation program would actually go over a year, will start to reduce.
Right. Okay, thank you. Yes, Mayor Snodgrass.
Thank you. Councillor Walsh?
Thank you, Mr. Snodgrass. I am in favor of this at 3.3%. I think it's a reasonable increase, maintaining our level of service as well. I don't have any further questions.
Thank you. Councillor Jones? Well, you've already, I skipped by you because you've already been talking. I use a Sharpie. Councillor Jones?
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. I too am in favor of the 3.3. I do appreciate the decreased mill rates. And, you know, there are a few things that need to be adjusted this year specifically. I feel that this is a great, I guess, way to do it and make the corrections fair. And I agree with you that they've done a great job in keeping our tax rates lower, especially when you do see some of the other municipalities. So thank you.
Councillor Barton?
Thank you, Mayor. For all the same reasons, very same reasons that all the other councillors have talked about, I too am in agreement with this 3.3. It's, I want to thank you for the amount of work that you guys put in the last year, going from 2 budgets essentially in 1 year. That's a lot of work to go through. And this has been a nice simplified format. I mean, we can still access all the details if we need, so I appreciate this a lot.
Thank you.
And we got to keep in mind that we're awfully lucky to have this tax stabilization reserve that we built through COVID and everything else, that we can use this to and use it fairly for our community, that we don't have to go into crazy tax increases to keep up. So, Councillor Kinghorn?
I knew I was going to get it in there.
Yeah.
So I'm okay with the 3.3. People know I don't like dipping into reserves unless you absolutely have to, and I see we're going to go in 9% of the reserves, so okay, it is what it is. But there's a column called Other in the capital budget, and I'd just like a little bit of clarification. When we're talking about the town farm and the work that we're doing over there, it shows 2 lines, 100,000 and 500,000. I'm assuming that that's going to come from the property sales. Like, what is Other? Like, I don't have a bank account at home called Other.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. It's other funding that's not tax-based. So it would be either donations or funding from other sources, like the sale of the properties, that would be used from that perspective.
Okay, but totally this money's coming from that sale of properties.
For the town farm, that's correct.
Awesome, thank you.
No further questions? Guess we're all done.
Just one point of clarification, if you don't mind.
Yep.
Under 3.3%, that is our revenue increase. The gross taxation will be 4.6%. Okay. And that is sufficient to pay for the 495,000, which is the core systemic change going on in perpetuity. The tax stabilization fund, at that 3.3% tax increase, we will still need to draw on the tax stabilization reserve, a total of 645,000, and that is for the compensation correction, the one-time 360,000, and then the list of special projects. So it's 2 components.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Understood. Thanks, David. No further questions? We'll move on. Committee of the whole meeting, so any wide open question and answer period? Nothing? That was the approval of this budget. Is it in today's agenda? Do you want to add it today, or do you want to do it?
We'll do it on the 22nd.
Okay, so the budget will be, this will come back to the January 22nd council meeting for approval. We're not gonna try to sneak it in today as we've got a full slate of stuff today anyway, so. Thanks very much, David, and to your whole team. Great work.
Thank you, everybody.
Meeting adjourned, 10:31.